Hey everyone, I'm Haley and I'm the behavior coordinator at South Suburban Humane Society. I know that introducing dogs can be a pretty stressful situation for people, but I'm hoping that I can talk a little bit about it and show some things to make it a less stressful situation for people. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that dogs are social animals. So when it comes down to it, the vast majority do want to socialize with other dogs and they do want to get along with those other dogs. There are obviously some exceptions that some dogs are going to be truly dog aggressive, and those are actual legitimate mental health issues that are the product of either trauma, poor socialization, or just genetics. That's not to say any specific breed, but individual dogs sometimes can be born with mental issues that prevent them from getting along with other animals properly. For the most part, the majority of dogs are going to want to interact with each other. They also are going to be better at interacting with each other than we are, and they're going to be better at reading other dogs than we are. I sort of have a somewhat hands-off approach to introducing dogs. There's some ways that we can avoid adding tension to the situation. I feel like a lot of times people try to keep as much control over the situation as possible, but that can actually make the dogs more anxious. It can actually cause things to happen that wouldn't have happened um, in the first place. So we just want to set them up for success. And one of the ways that we can do that is introducing them in a neutral, open space. So ideally, it would be done outside. You can't just open your front door and let a new dog run in and expect your current dog to be okay with that. Sometimes the yard is even not neutral enough, so you may have to go to a park down the street. And then you probably don't want a whole lot of people there either. You don't want a crowd, you don't want a group of people surrounding the dogs, because it can just make one dog uneasy, and then that may cause kind of like a domino effect through the whole situation. Next, if you have to leash the dogs, you want the leash to be as loose as possible. You don't want to be pulling on their neck, pulling them back, or causing any tension, because that does add tension to the entire situation. Some dogs have leash reactivity, so they just become reactive to other dogs when they're on the leash because they are frustrated and upset that they can't move the way they want to. And leash introductions also cause them to sometimes greet each other or interact in ways that aren't kind of like the social norm for dogs. When they meet each other naturally, they're going to come from the side, whereas if they're both on leash, especially if they're pulling to get closer, they can really only come at each other nose to nose. So if you can, get rid of the leash completely. However, I do actually introduce a lot of dogs with leashes still on. I just am not holding them. Drag leashes are super useful and super helpful if something does go wrong. Then you have a point of contact, so you can either step on that leash and get one dog kind of immobilized so the other dog can move away, or if you have two people and you need to each grab a leash and pull them apart, that's a way to do it as well. I think the most important part of that, though, is that you are not pulling on the leash when the dogs are moving towards each other to interact. So when I introduce dogs at the shelter, especially to play groups, I like to let them sniff between a fence or like a gate if possible. Some dogs are going to have barrier reactivity to that, and especially if you are doing it in your own yard, your dog may guard their own yard through the fence, but I think that this can give you a really good and a safe read on a dog, where you can let them come up to each other and approach loosely with no tension on the leash, but you can also get like a really natural reaction with them, while still having that safety of having that fence between them. This is the point where I would be reading a lot into the new dog's body language, but also any dogs that I currently have in the yard. I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to them as well, because as I mentioned earlier, they are going to understand the subtleties a lot more than I am going to. So say that a dog seems pretty normal and calm at the gate, but the other dogs don't want to come near them and greet them, or they seem uncomfortable, or another dog starts showing aggression towards that dog, I'm going to take that into consideration because they were probably picking up on something that I wasn't quite getting. And it works the other way too, where there might be a dog that's barking a lot and kind of acting a fool, and I am a little hesitant to let them into the yard. But then if I pay attention to the way the other dogs are reacting and they seem comfortable and they seem excited and they kind of seem like they want to play with this dog, I may take a chance on them and let them into the yard and see how that goes. Sometimes it doesn't go well, other times it goes fantastically. And then there are other times where we might have to separate them once or twice, but it ends up being something that they can work through really easily. Another really important part of this is allowing the dogs to communicate with each other the way that they are able to communicate. A lot of people will kind of stop everything at a first growl, and I think that is one of the worst things that you can do. Growling is simply a way of communicating. It should never be discouraged, especially when a dog is trying to communicate with another dog that they're uncomfortable. And corrections as well. So sometimes it might seem scary, but if a dog snaps or lunges or growls or barks at another dog to kind of scare them off, as long as that dog is taking the correction and backing off and giving that dog space and accepting that without becoming reactive themselves, then that is a perfectly healthy and wonderful reaction, because we want them to interact as naturally as possible and communicate as naturally as possible. It's just so much better for them to communicate with each other and then have us step in only if they really need it. Like if a dog is given a correction but doesn't take it well and then gets mad or something like that. The only time I'm going to jump in is when a dog is really upset and the other dog is not listening. I like to truly let them figure out their own boundaries and let them communicate those to each other. And if they are maybe a little rusty on their social skills or they just don't totally have those, this is just another way for them to learn them. So if an introduction happens and it doesn't necessarily go perfectly, but you feel that it could be something that can be worked through, a really good thing to do is go for a tandem walk. As long as neither of the dogs are on leash reactive, you can take them for a walk so they don't meet each other, but they are close enough to be interacting kind of from a distance and be walking together to kind of build a somewhat of a relationship with each other. We're trying to interact face to face again. I think that it's really important to also keep in mind that it's very worth trying more than once, and it's worth trying again a few minutes later, and it's worth trying again the next day. Sometimes if a dog either has rusty or non-existent social skills, it often can just be something that they end up learning through these repeated interactions. And my name is Haley, and I'm the behavior coordinator at South Suburban Humane Society. You can email me or comment down below if you have any questions or suggestions for topics I should cover. Hope everyone's doing well, and we can't wait to see you guys again.